ever seen. To see this beauty was to be lost. It felt like I fell to the ground as the splendor overwhelmed me. My heart was thrilled as it was filled with the radiance. I was left gasping for breath once I passed by. And the sight I'm referring to wasn't the Sistine Chapel. It wasn't St. Peter's Basilica. No, not even the glory of Rome could strike me in such a way. It wasn't man's creation. It was God's creation that pierced my heart. And not just any of God's creation, the crown of God's creation. Woman. It was the beauty of a woman that pierced my heart, and it took hours for me to recover from the wound she left. Beauty has that power, the power to pierce through our defenses. It also has the power to transform. The gospel tells us today that you are the light of the world. Light brings out color that is absent in the darkness. It also says you are the salt of the earth. Salt brings out the flavor that is hidden in our food. And we might also say that you are the beauty of mankind. Beauty brings out what is best in man, what is most noble, what is hiding and waiting for someone worthy of sacrifice. How many smelly, irresponsible, and arrogant young boys have been transformed into clean, trustworthy, and generous men by the glance of one woman. Behold the power of beauty. Now, beauty will save the world, and I've been describing mostly the external beauty of women, but the beauty that will save the world is a different kind. It has many of the same characteristics. It too thrills the heart, it too leaves a wound, and it too transforms. The beauty that will save the world is mercy. This is the beauty of Christ, and this is the beauty of the church, his bride. Now, if salt that has lost its flavor is good for nothing, is thrown out and trampled underfoot, what do you think will happen to an ugly church? What do you think will happen to us if we are not merciful, if we let ourselves go, so to speak? The church exists in order to evangelize. She doesn't have a mission, she is a mission. The church exists in order to evangelize. Christ commissioned the church in order to make disciples of all nations. He sends every baptized person out to share the good news that Jesus is Lord, he is risen, and he is merciful. Are we fulfilling our mission? Or are we an ugly church? Now you may ask yourself, what does beauty have to do with our mission? Everything. Beauty will save the world. Pope Francis recently wrote an apostolic exhortation entitled Evangelii Gaudium, which means the joy of the gospel. I highly recommend that you Google this, look it up when you go home and read it. The joy of the gospel. In this document, Pope Francis wrote, the church grows by attraction. A beautiful church grows. A beautiful church fulfills her mission. And Pope Francis has certainly proven these words to be true by his beautiful acts of mercy. From embracing the man with a terrible skin disease, to inviting two homeless men to celebrate his birthday in the Vatican, to leading the whole world in prayer for peace, Pope Francis is bringing so many people back to the church by his beautiful witness of the gospel. He is stunning. He is mesmerizing. He is beautiful. His gestures thrill the heart. And I think that it's time that we quit admiring him and start following his example. How can the beauty of mercy shine forth in our lives? How can the lives of our friends, families, and neighbors thrill with the radiance of our church? The first reading tells us the answer. Share your bread with the hungry. shelter the oppressed and the homeless, clothe the naked when you see them, and do not turn your back on your own. Then your light shall break forth like the dawn, and your wound shall quickly be healed. See, mercy isn't just forgiving others. In that reading, Isaiah was describing 3 of the corporal works of mercy. Mercy is also caring for the poor. A merciful church is a beautiful church. And we know this. We know this. Generally, it isn't ignorance that keeps us from fulfilling our mission as baptized members of the church. We know that we ought to share the good news with others. We know that we ought to care for the poor. We know this. It isn't ignorance that keeps us from fulfilling our mission as baptized members of the church, though it's something else. What keeps us from fulfilling our mission as baptized members of the church is that we haven't been wounded by beauty. Let me read that passage again from the first reading. Share your bread with the hungry, shelter the oppressed and the homeless, clothe the naked when you see them, and do not turn your back on your own. Then your light shall break forth like the dawn, and your wound shall be healed. If we're not moved to these beautiful acts of mercy, it's because we haven't been wounded. We don't have a wound that needs to be healed. God's mercy is more intoxicating, more mesmerizing, more beautiful than even the beauty of that woman that pierced my heart. I recovered from that wound in a couple of hours, yet the wound that Jesus leaves can only be healed by sharing the same mercy with others, the same arrow of beauty with others. Upon receiving this wound, one's life is entirely transformed, much like the lives of young men smitten by the beauty of young maidens. If we're not moved to these beautiful acts of mercy, if we're not moved to seek healing by sharing love, then we can only conclude that we haven't been wounded by beauty, that God's love hasn't pierced our hearts. This is the source of ugliness in the church. Let us say no to an ugly church. Let us seek God's mercy here in the Eucharist, in the confessional, and in daily prayer. It's so wonderful when we see beautiful things, but how much greater it is when we see Him who made those things beautiful. Beauty Himself. Let us say yes to the mercy of God. May His beauty pierce our hearts in adoration, in devotions, in reading Scripture, and in concrete acts of mercy for the poor, personal acts of love for the poor. Then our light will break forth like the dawn. Our bigger salaries won't mean bigger houses, bigger wallets, and bigger closets. They will mean bigger hearts. Hearts wounded by the love of God and therefore moved in order to live simply so that others may simply live. Let us say yes to a beautiful church, a merciful church. The less that we spend on ourselves, the more that we can be merciful to others, the more beautiful our witness of the gospel will be. And we fulfill our mission to evangelize and baptize all nations